Firstly, sir, let's start off by asking, Iran's airspace has been shut and Armenians reporting border pressure, rather Americans are reporting border pressure. How prepared are the neighbouring countries to absorb a potential wave of regional displacement or cross-border movement?
Of course, the neighboring countries to Iran are in a very bad position, not only for the expectations of displacement waves after the US warnings and the Israeli strikes, but also a lot of neighboring regions to Iran might be actually threatened and exposed to the risk of being struck. Of course, the neighboring countries have already enough problems and internal challenges that might minimize its abilities to receive refugees or displaced civilians. The entire region is witnessing such strikes. We have seen what happened in Syria and also what happened in Sudan and different other regions. So apparently the infrastructure or the qualified structure to receive any displaced are extremely exhausted in the light of the ongoing attacks. So there might be no capacity to receive the displaced. This war has to be seized to avoid this unknown fate and this very difficult situation that will be created due to the ongoing strikes.
Well, sir, as you said, the situation right now is quite difficult, and Iraq is currently delivering humanitarian aid to Iran. How does this affect Iraq's regional positioning, especially that it has ties with both Iran and Western countries?
Of course, Iraq is in a very difficult position because they have strong relations with Iran, as Iran has a strong influence on the armed and political powers inside Iraq. And in the meantime, Iraq also wants to isolate itself from the rising crises in the region. They do not want to be engaged in the conflict because engaging in such conflict will lead to more internal challenges. But unfortunately, their position or location geographically puts it in the crossfire between Iran and Israel. So anyway, Iraq is facing this crisis with a lot of challenges, and I think that the political dialogue so far by the Iraqi government is trying to take itself away from taking a direct bias to one of of both parties. To my estimate, there are different belongings and affiliations to Iraqi factions to the Iranian philosophy and the Iranian politics, which will be a lot of pressure on Iraq. In addition, the United States is also still influencing the Iraqi decision and the Iraqi internal. So Iraq seems to be one of the most influenced and impacted countries with these strikes.
Well, sir, could you also tell us more about the legal and strategic implications of the reported Israeli strikes in and around the Iranian nuclear site, given the current tit-for-tat escalations that are happening between both countries?
Definitely, it's a huge threat and it's a violation of most of the international laws and standards related to protecting civilians and protecting sites that might be targeted for nuclear purposes. Targeting the nuclear Iranian sites will not be only limited to these sites, but they will lead to radiology and a lot of other neighboring countries can be impacted, and this will also harm a lot of civilians. This is a blatant violation of international law, especially that there has been no procedures whatsoever to provide the containment standards to contain these emissions or to minimize the impacts, especially with the ongoing strikes and attacks and the high frequency of these strikes. This will not leave no space for the relevant authorities, whether international or national, to take the necessary precautions to contain any emissions, or at least contain the neighboring regions. I think with the expansion of the military operations and with the increasing frequency of strikes in the confrontation between Iran and Israel, I imagine that Israel might actually resort to targeting more the nuclear reactors, which is a very serious threat to the Gulf region and to the Arab shores. These impacts due to the Israeli strikes might actually extend to include Arab and neighboring countries to Iran.
Also, as you said, the frequency of the missile exchange is quite high, and civilian casualty as well is quite high. What role, realistically speaking, can the international bodies like the UN or the EU, for instance, play to de-escalate the current situation or try to stop what's happening right now?
There is a difference between what should be done by these institutions, which is preserve peace and security, and calling for avoiding military options to resolve conflicts between countries. And this is what must be done by these institutions in the framework of the rules and responsibilities stipulated by the UN charters and international laws. But in reality, these institutions are not carrying out their due rules, and they do not have an effective role to de-escalate the situation. The entire case is pending the US and Israeli decisions, and both countries are supporting the military actions and operations to resolve problems with Iran. We had hoped for the international community to play a bigger role in making the negotiations succeed regarding the nuclear program, but things went to the confrontation and escalation path. I think the international community has a lot of responsibility to contain the Israeli arrogance and to stop the Israeli endeavors to use force to settle its disagreements with the neighboring countries. Now Israel is destabilizing the entire region, occupying Syrian lands, bombed Lebanon and Yemen, in addition to its genocidal practices in the Gaza Strip. And now they are opening new front with Iran. The international community must pressure Israel and put it back on track to commit to international laws and standards. Unfortunately, so far, Israel is representing an arrogant state above the law, and the United States is providing cover and support and providing diplomatic cover that supports Israel to go without punishment, evading all of these crimes they are committing against civilians in different states.